listener production.
Hello, welcome to The Briefing. I'm Sasha Barbagat. As artificial intelligence gets exponentially better at just about everything, it's making people in all kinds of professions, from teachers to doctors, lawyers to retail workers to journos, a little bit nervous.
I hate to say it, I think it's going to put quite a few podcasters like yourself out of business if we're not careful.
Well, I think we should be a little bit more careful about putting podcasters like myself out of a job. Should we even be talking about this, Toby? What the hell?
Yeah, but AI is also making a lot of people very excited, with new mind-bending capabilities coming online every week. And coming up in the second half of this episode, we're explaining which AI tools you should be using in 2025 to keep ahead of the curve. First, though, let's get into the headlines with Chris Spiru. It is Thursday, January 9th.
Morning, Sash. Morning, everybody. There have been celebrations after a hiker who spent 13 days missing in New South Wales' Kosciuszko National Park was found yesterday afternoon. The 23-year-old uni student from Melbourne had been missing since Boxing Day, with police saying he survived on creek water, berries and muesli bars.
He found a hut up there in the mountains, and there were 2 muesli bars up there that he's eaten, and that's pretty much all that he's had to consume over the last 2 weeks.
Police Superintendent Andrew Splitt there. Hadi Nazari was first reported missing by 2 friends in the Snowy Mountains after he had gone off track to take some photos and failed to rejoin the group at a campsite. It sparked a desperate search with more than 350 people, including New South Wales Police and Ambulance, SES personnel, National Park Rangers and volunteers joining the effort. But it was a group of hikers who accidentally stumbled across him yesterday afternoon, just 10 kilometres from where rescuers had set up a search command post. He told them he was lost and that he was very, very thirsty, Sash.
Yeah, and the scenes of Hardy being embraced by his family and friends after he was airlifted to safety are very heartwarming. We got a smile out of him. His sister has released a statement thanking everyone involved in his rescue. Now, he was treated for dehydration at the site and was taken to Cooma Hospital last night in good health and with no obvious injuries. Rescuers say it was his fitness level, bushwalking experience and having access to fresh drinking water that played a big role in him surviving 2 weeks. Kosciuszko National Park is not very forgiving. It is, I think, a miracle that he was able to survive and is in such good nick. Now, there were a couple of times that there were these clues found that really kept rescuers' hopes alive. On New Year's Eve, they discovered some rubbish and hiking poles that were believed to belong to Hardy, and that was near the Kosciuszko River. Then on Sunday, they found the remnants of a campfire, a lighter, a camera, and a camera bag near the Gihai River. So that was a big moment for rescuers as they were looking and searching to go, okay, he's nearby, he's around, he's alive, let's keep up hope. And they did, and but like as you said, it was hikers. They just accidentally went, oh, g'day, mate. How you going? I love these stories because, you know, we deal with so much horrific stuff, you know, when it comes to news, and to get a good outcome like this is really, really amazing.
Yeah, well, one of those awful stories, Sash, we're heading to the US now, where wildfires have forced thousands to flee in Los Angeles in what's being called a widespread emergency by authorities.
The National Weather Service has predicted a continued red flag weather event with strong winds and low humidities, placing all residents of Los Angeles County in danger.
LA County Fire Chief Anthony Marone speaking there. 2 people have been confirmed dead and more than 1,000 properties have been destroyed. 4 blazes are currently burning out of control around the West Coast city. The one that's causing the biggest concern for firefighters right now is in the suburb of Pacific Palisades.
Yeah, there are fears conditions will worsen today as the rest of LA becomes blanketed in smoke and power outages hit the city. 30,000 people are currently under evacuation orders, but other locals are being asked to remain where they are due to poor visibility. Now, Aussie expat Jackson McLennan is among those people, and he spoke to us from his home in Pasadena, which is near one of the fires burning, this morning.
We had a very sleepless night, keeping up to date with all the updates in the evacuation zones. There was this kind of eerie orange glow through the street, in the sky. There's so much smoke where I am. I had to sleep with a face mask on and the air purifier cranked up because it was so smoky in the air. We can't go outside without wearing 2 masks. I'm wearing a mask inside now.
I think Aussies have such I think we feel the pain, particularly we see the California wildfires that come around, unfortunately, very regularly, almost yearly it feels at the moment. And one of the scary points that was made by authorities was that all 4 fires are currently 0% contained. We know what that means here. That means that they are burning out of control. There are no containment lines and it's going to get worse. Now, the area, it's worth noting, is highly populated by celebrities and a lot of them are sharing their stories. Heidi and Spencer Pratt from The Hills, which was a show in the early 2000s, they've been documenting their journey on social media, and really sadly they watched as their house burnt down. They had evacuated, but they could see where their house was and they filmed it. Mark Hamill from Star Wars, he's evacuated. So is James Woods, Mandy Moore, Moby, Eugene Levy, Chris Pratt. And Kamala Harris's California home was in the evacuation zone, but she is not there at the moment. She's in Washington, D.C. So really, really scary scenes out of LA. And worth noting, this is in their winter. This doesn't happen normally, and it's what we're hearing about more and more with climate change, where it's not a fire season, it's fire season all year.
Back home now, the pilot who died in the Rottnest Island seaplane crash has been identified as 34-year-old James Wong. He and 2 European tourists in their 60s died on Tuesday afternoon when the aircraft they were on plunged into the water shortly after takeoff. Their remains were recovered by police divers that night. 3 other people were injured in the crash, one of them seriously. The remainder of the wreckage will be retrieved from the water this morning as the Australian Transport Safety Bureau investigates what caused the accident.
And experts are raising their eyebrows at a new global report that's ranked Brisbane worse than Sydney and Melbourne when it comes to traffic. So INRIC's Global Traffic Scorecard has put the Queensland capital at 10th worst in the world for congestion, behind places like London and New York. Makes sense. There are some serious questions, though, behind the methodology of this report, Chris. Experts are weighing in to say it's inaccurate because it compares travel times when roads are empty in the middle of the night with speeds at peak hour to calculate what it calls, quote, delay.
Yeah, and sticking with the results, Melbourne was ranked the next worst city in Australia, losing about 65 hours to congestion a year, followed by Sydney with 51 hours. Then it was Perth, 42 hours, the Gold Coast, 40 hours, Newcastle, 39 hours, and Adelaide, 30 hours. I mean, look, these results to me are weird, and I also find it weird that Melbourne traffic trumps Sydney traffic.
Oh, I don't know. I've lived in both cities.
Yeah.
Melbourne's pretty bad.
Worse than Sydney?
Sydney gets a really bad rap.
Yeah. I mean, I've been on the roads in both. I just find it so much easier driving in Melbourne. We were talking about this before. I haven't driven in Brisbane as a driving adult, so I don't know what it's like driving in Brisbane. Any of our briefers in Brisbane, please confirm or deny these results. We'd really welcome
Maybe
that.
we should put this in behind the briefing in our broadcast channel. And you tell us if you've driven in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, which one to you ranks worse? Because according to this report, the average Brisbane driver lost 84 hours to congestion last year. And that's compared to, like you said, Melbourne had 65 hours lost, Sydney was 51. So I struggle to believe it. Now, The Guardian looked a bit deeper into this and they spoke to a professor at the Centre for Accident Research and Road Safety at QUT. Now, they said Brisbane looked worse than Sydney because it had higher speed limits. So they said it's about 50 k's an hour in New South Wales, but it's 60 or 70 in Brisbane. And in a sense, the high congestion value is a representative that the speed limits are too high. So I know it's like weird methodology, but that's why experts are kind of going, I don't know if this is quite right. But anyway, either way, we can all agree traffic sucks and it exists everywhere, all over Australia. Perth, Adelaide, we feel you, baby. We know it's there. Chris, thank you so much for joining us for the headlines today. Next up, we are getting into our deep dive, looking at all the cool AI tools you should be using in 2025.
Hey, Bension here. As we all go about our regular lives, people in AI are working on technology many of them say could radically change every human society. They reckon the coming wave of technology could be as massive for the world as the Industrial Revolution or the invention of the printing press. They're warning hundreds of millions of jobs could be on the chopping block as a result. But the opportunities for those who learn to use AI effectively could be incredible. So, which AI tools should we be using and experimenting with in 2025 to make sure we stay ahead of the curve? Toby Walsh is Professor of Artificial Intelligence at the University of New South Wales. Toby, thanks so much for joining us on The Briefing. Should we be using AI in 2025?
Oh, I think you definitely should be using AI. If you want to be one of the people who keeps a job, not one of the people who's replaced by AI, be an expert on using AI to lift your productivity, do all the 4Ds, the dirty, the dull, the difficult and dangerous for you.
Oh, wow. Can you just explain that a bit more? The dirty, the dull, the difficult and the dangerous?
We like to summarize the things that AI can do in terms of those 4Ds. So it's very useful doing dirty things that humans don't want to do. It's working down mines, for example. Dull, it's very good at doing all the repetitive dull things that you used to have to do. Dangerous, back to the mines, I suppose, but also clearing minefields even. And difficult things. It's also good at punching through all the combinations for you.
If someone listening to this has never used AI before, where do they start? And how should you learn to use it if you currently have no idea?
Well, the great news there is that there's a plethora of free AI tools available where you can get your hands dirty. I've got two favorite examples that actually I use personally myself on a day-to-day basis, and I would strongly encourage your listeners to look at, because I think they'd find them quite useful themselves. The first one is an AI research assistant, I think is the best way to describe it. It's a prototype tool that Google provides. It's called Notebook LLM. And what you can do is you can upload a bunch of PDFs. So it could be an article that you're needing to study, or a talk that you're wanting to give, or a talk that you heard. And then you can query the language model about that. It will give you a summary. So you don't have to read the long documents yourself. It will give you revision notes, some questions you could test yourself on with it. And then one of the final things that it can do, which I find really quite endearing, quite attractive, is it will make a podcast for you summarizing the contents of those documents. It's a 2-person podcast with a male and female voice, and it does a fantastic job of summarizing, discussing the topic. So I can think, I hate to say it, I think it's going to put quite a few podcasters like yourself out of business if we're not careful.
Well, I think we should be a little bit more careful about putting podcasters like myself out of a job. Should we even be talking about this, Toby? What the hell?
Well, no, the thing is, it's a great tool for lifting your productivity. So if you're a podcaster who gets on top of his or her subject quicker and better, then you're going to be that much better. I think this, it's a good personal tool, but I very much hope and suspect is not going to take over in well listened to podcasts like this one, because, at the end of the day, we do like the human touch.
That's exactly true, don't we, everyone? Now, we have heard, speaking of job losses, that there was going to be like hundreds of millions of job losses when ChatGPT basically came out. Why is it, do you think, that we haven't seen that enormous wave of job losses from AI yet?
Well, technology always takes a time to roll out, but I do think we should be having serious conversations and be thinking about these issues. There are some worrying trends. The FT put out a study looking at, for example, graphic design. So when these image AI tools, generative tools, things like Stable Diffusion and Midjourney, which can do some of the things that a graphic designer can do, perhaps not as well, but nevertheless, they could do some of that sort of stuff, like graphic design stuff. You can see a graph. They looked at jobs on Fiverr. Fiverr is one of these websites where freelancers can advertise themselves and find work. And you can see the day that those tools were released, there was a 15% drop in the amount of work, graphic design work, being offered on Fiverr, and also roughly a 15% drop in the average amount of money paid for those jobs. And so I do worry that, that might be an example of a canary in the coal mine. We might see that filtering through to the rest of us. I think if you want to be one of the people who is gainfully and well employed in the future, be someone who's using these tools so that you're that much more productive, that much more creative than other people. Because also the tools are there to amplify what we do, not just to replace what we do. I think they're great tools for example, for brainstorming ideas, for thinking out of the box. So they're there to be used and there to help you do what you do better.
If I'm going to summarize something on Notebook LLM, for example. We know that artificial intelligence does this thing where sometimes it just makes stuff up. This is called hallucination in the AI industry. How do you know when an AI is hallucinating?
The tools do a lot less hallucination than they did. The first generation of tools were much worse at hallucinating, and there was plentiful examples of them making bogus references up and bogus legal cases that they cited, and lots of things that have caused significant embarrassment to various users. So it's not as big a problem as, but it hasn't gone away, and I don't think it's ever going to completely go away, because we do want these tools to help us be creative, and we want them to be creative in themselves. We want them to help us write essays that had never been written before, write poems that had never been written before, compose songs that had never been played before. So we do want them to be somewhat creative, but not in citing sources. So at the end of the day, the only way you can be sure is if you know the topic yourself, an expert, and you go and check the primary sources where there are things that you haven't seen before.
We spoke a bit before this, and I mentioned ChatGPT, obviously the most prominent artificial intelligence, and you weren't so hot on ChatGPT. Why shouldn't people be using it?
ChatGPT is good enough tool, but actually I think OpenAI, the company that produced ChatGPT, is in a very competitive field. And then my second recommendation is an alternative to ChatGPT, which I think, and actually I've found many other people find, is somewhat slightly superior in its capabilities. It's a system produced by a company called Anthropic, which are some people who actually used to work at OpenAI and went off and started their own company. And they produced a chatbot called Claude. And Claude is slightly more professional. It's a bit better at following the instructions. ChatGPT will sometimes go off and do things that you didn't actually ask it to do. Claude's very good at following the instructions. It has a very nice tone of voice. And I don't think it hallucinates quite as much as ChatGPT. So that's the one I reach for when I want to write a business letter or something to help me polish a reference for someone. Claude is my writing tool of choice.
Could you give me the top 5 AI tools that you would say they're available now and we should be using them in 2025?
Claude is the generic language model I prefer most. Notebook LLM, the one I just mentioned, which is this AI research system that's wonderful if you've got a document, a PDF or something that you want to understand. You don't necessarily want to read it yourself. You want a summary of it. You want to ask questions about what's in the document or documents. It will actually take in a whole bunch of documents. Stable Diffusion, if you want to generate a graphic, that's a pretty good image tool that's used. And another one I'd suggest is Google's new video generation tool called Vion. It's fantastic. It's only just come out. This is really the cutting edge of what we can do. Of course, generating video is much, in some sense, much harder problem than generating text or still images. But the examples I've seen of it illustrating it seem absolutely fantastic. You can generate, a picture of a dog skateboarding down the road, or anything else what might amuse you, which would obviously be quite a lot of fun to play with.
One of the criticisms that I've heard of AI is that we wanted the robots to be like doing our laundry for us while we do art, for example, and instead we're finding we're doing the laundry and they're creating the videos of the dog going down the road. Is that something that you worry about in terms of the future of AI, it actually taking the stuff that we want to be doing and doing it better rather than the stuff that we don't?
100%. That is something I think we should be very concerned about. The way that, all of this intellectual property of our artists, whether they be graphic designers or musicians or authors, crafting art in words. And that's something that we definitely should be worried about, that humans do the things that are important. At the end of the day, actually, I don't think that computers are ever going to replace artists in our society for a good reason, which is that a computer's never going to fall in love. A computer's never going to lose a loved one, never going to have to contemplate its mortality or deal with the mortality of its loved ones, because those are human experiences. And great art speaks to the human condition. It speaks to those things like love, loss, and life. So in that sense, I don't think we have to worry in the long term. But I do think we have to worry, for example, about how, all of the world's books have been ingested into these language models, and the graphic designs of all these graphic designers, and now maybe graphic designers are being put out of work, and what will happen to those graphic designers? Those are important conversations we definitely should be having, and worrying about, the economic impact it's going to have. We had this with music streaming, and we discovered that at the beginning, when we had things like Napster, all the music that was being streamed was stolen. That was not sustainable, and that was not going to be good news for musicians, and we should pay musicians for their music. We've moved now to a place where we do pay musicians for their music. We have services like Spotify, which return revenue to musicians. But interesting there, musicians, even the big ones like Taylor Swift, they make their money not from selling music, they make their money from touring, from live performance. Because that live experience is unique. That's something that machines are never going to replace. The thing that we value is being there in person for that unique experience. You either were at the concert and you experienced it, or you weren't. And that was something that is going to be timeless.
Over the next 5-10 years, what do you think people will be able to do with artificial intelligence that they can't do now?
Well, the next big thing that's going to happen is this idea of agentic AI. So at the moment, we've got these language models, and you type in a prompt, a query, and it can answer your question or draw a picture that corresponds to that prompt, or make even now a video or, a song that corresponds to that. But what we're going to have next is AI as personal assistants, where they go off and do a bunch of stuff for you, where they actually go and say you want to buy a new car. You say, well, go research the market for me, and go get me some quotes, and we'll go off and, you find what's available in the market, what's coming. And I've looked in your diary, and I've booked you a test drive at 4 p.m. tomorrow at the Audi showroom, or whatever it is that they've decided that's going to be appropriate for you. So just as rich people today have personal assistants who do things for them, we're going to have these AI assistants that don't just answer our questions as they do now, but actually go off and do stuff, book things for us, and look things up, and talk to other people, and research things, and then come back with a summary, and having, had some responsibility to do those things for us, like a PA would do for a rich person.
Well, it's a brave new world, and it'll be fascinating and potentially concerning to see what comes next. Toby Walsh, thanks so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Be my pleasure.
Toby Walsh, Professor of Artificial Intelligence at the University of New South Wales there. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. And remember, this episode is one in a special series we're running all this week on The Briefing on how to start your 2025 right. We're helping you learn how to change careers in the new year, how to consume news and stay informed while maintaining your mental health, how to be hopeful in 2025, and more. As always, there's also plenty of exclusive The Briefing content for you to check out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast, and on TikTok and YouTube, search Listener Newsroom. I'm Bension Siebert. See you next time.
Listener.